This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
My name is Donald Engel, and I reside in Barnstable, Massachusetts.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted, I enlisted in the Coast Guard in 1961.
Did you join during wartime?
I joined during the Vietnam era.
How long had the war been going on before you entered the military, or did it start after?
It started before, and we went over as advisors, the military, not myself.
How old were you when you joined?
I was 20 years old.
When you were young, did you imagine yourself joining the military?
No.
What did your parents think of you enlisting in the military?
They did not want me to go.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
I was attracted to boats in water, and it looked like a very nice service to belong to, which it was.
What was basic training like?
Basic training was 13 weeks of physical training, classes, educational stuff relating to military life.
And where was the training?
The training was for the Coast Guard was in Cape May, New Jersey.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes, I remember going by train from Providence to New Jersey and being with a whole bunch of other new recruits, and it was quite exciting and something I looked forward to.
Where were you stationed?
I came out of boot camp, and I went to Boston quarters, head District 1, and I was assigned to a weather cutter, a 311-foot ship, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Castle Rock, and went to Europe on it. The first summer I was there, as we went over to escort the Engel sailing ship, and we spent the summer in Europe and had a very nice trip.
What was the name of the ship you were on?
The name of the ship I was on was the Coast Guard cutter Castle Rock, and it was a W-383, 383 feet long. The W stand for a weather ship, which we would go for a month at a time up in the North Atlantic and sit up there for a month doing weather patrols and a bunch of other activity that went on that we did.
What was your job or assignment?
My job was, I was an engineman, meaning working on engines and anything military, anything that pertained to keeping the ship running.
Were you afraid? What was your biggest fear?
My biggest fear was in terrible storms rolling over.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Memorable experiences, they were all quite memorable. There was one particular time when I was stationed at Woods Hole after my 2 years on the weather ship, and we were called out for a two ships that collided on Buzzards Bay, which was, one was the Fernview and the other one was a Dynafuel, and the Fernview cut the dynafuel in half, and we were the first ones on the scene trying to put fires out, and we were out there for 3 days, and obviously other ships came to help in the situation. That was quite memorable, and I had a friend of mine who had taken pictures for me, and he was in the helicopter that was doing photos, and he was on the same ship that I was on in Boston. Another experience I had was, again, we were called out many times for search and rescue, and a week before Christmas, a Navy jet pilot, the jet had two pilots in it, and the jet crashed. One of the pilots bailed out, the other one went down with the plane. The problem was when the fellow bailed out, he was too close to the water and he got killed. And we had to wrap him up in his parachute and bring him back to his family. That was very tough. Week before Christmas. Other times we had gone out and there was a fisherman who had been in the water. He drowned, and he was in the water quite a while and was floating. We were called. We went out to pick him up, and that was very difficult because when we put the Stokes ladder underneath him to pick him up, his body proceeded to sieve through the screens, so we had to put a blanket down, then try to pick him up. It was a lot going on in the ocean, and it was all trying to help people as best we could, take them into port when they broke down, people getting hurt, taking care of them. God, I was in the service for 5 years. And my last tour of duty I was at Highland Light for a year. It was a family light. It was very nice. I enjoyed it out there a lot, and having access to the beach and everything that fishing and all of that business that went on, and it was very nice there. Golf course. And
how did you stay in touch with your family?
Well, in those days, you got in touch with your family. Either you wrote them a letter, or if you had a telephone available, you could call them at that time.
What was the food like?
The food, I thought about that, and the food was, I can't say it was not terrible. It was very good.
How are the rules? Rules?
The what?
The rules?
Rules?
Yes.
What rules of, what kind of rules are you thinking? Rules of you pay it to you had to, the rules were if you wanted to go on liberty, let's put it this way, if you want to go on liberty, you had to dress accordingly, you had to shoes shined, and then you would get a liberty pass, and you could leave the ship when you were in port, and they ran 2 out of 3 liberty, where you could get 2 nights off, and then the third night you had to stay on ship and do your duties there. It's kind of other than that, it was you stood watch. You stood 4 hours on, 8 hours off, 4 hours on, 8 hours off, and which was okay when it was during the daytime, because then you didn't have to work. You just stood your watch. But then when you had to get up at 3:30 in the morning to stand a 4-hour watch, and that means you got off watch at 8 o'clock, and then you had to go in turn 2, meaning you had to work until 4 o'clock that afternoon, and you went back on watch again. There's a lot of, and there could be a lot of boredom also, but not so much. It was you were always pretty active. You were always busy. It's always something going on. You could take classes, you could do courses, whatever, whatever you wanted to do. It would be up to you personally, but there was not much time off.
What did you do when on leave?
Well, when you're 21 in Boston and you go on leave, usually you go downtown Boston and do what sailors do. You find yourself some beer and movies and tours of Boston, which was very nice also. But you were unrestricted. You could do whatever you wanted to, as long as it was in reason. You couldn't be out doing stuff because you were monitored by the shore patrol, and if you were doing something, they could pick you up, and then also the police could pick you up, and then if they bring you back to the ship, then you would get a court martial, which would restrict you to the ship for any amount of time that they deemed necessary. So you didn't really want to mess up.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
I can't remember being pressured into doing anything that I didn't want to do. Stress. It can be. Stress can be. Everybody's stress level is different. You can be stressed by. A lot of times you make your own stress. But if you kept your nose clean and you did what you were supposed to do, you knew what to expect. They knew what to expect and you knew what to expect. And you just followed the rules and regulations and you didn't have any too much stress. Getting back on time, I guess, would be a stress point, to make sure you got back from Liberty on time.
Tell me about an accomplishment you weren't sure you could achieve, but you did.
Accomplishment I achieved. Well, when you come out of boot camp, you're a seaman apprentice, and then you stay in that grade, and that's not very good money in the seaman apprentice. So you want to become a seaman, and you studied and you took a test, and then if that rate was open, you could be a seaman. And then from there, you could go, your next step would be to be a petty officer. And what happened with me is I got in and I was a seaman for 2 years, and boatswain mate was being my next step, third class boatswain mate, which the rate was not open, so I changed my rate to engineman, and that was a more an open rate where you could go up the ladder faster than you could a boatswain's mate. So I changed to an engineman, and was in for, like I said, I was in for 5 years, and I come out as a E5, which is a second class engineman.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
You know, I thought about that, and I really never thought about good luck charms or whatever. I don't remember anybody saying things about wishing for good luck.
How did people entertain themselves?
Well, when you're at sea, there was a lot of card playing, gambling with cards. You're playing dominoes, different games. You could, we had a library. You could read. Entertainment is, you gotta have to think about that. But entertainment, I think that was basically what was going on. Playing cards was the big.
What were some of the harrowing stories from the service?
I thought I just gave you a couple of harrowing stories. Oh my God, there was. there was a lot of harrowing stories, saving people's lives. Mostly when I was stationed in Woods Hole, we had a 36-foot motor boat, a motor launch, and we had a 30-foot maintenance boat. Back then in 1963, we had the first 44-footer that was built down in Baltimore, and that allowed us. That was a boat that you could run, you could turn it over, and it would right itself, as along with the 36-footer wooden boat. It was down in Chatham that they made a movie out of, the sinking of the Pendleton, where that 36-footer went out and saved 30 people off of that. And the 44-footer was a steel ship and had twin engines, and this we did an awful lot of saving people and helping people achieve where they were going, and they would run up on the rocks in Woods Hole Passage, which was a terrible place to try to go through, especially in the fog. And it's what do I want to say? It's a challenge. Let's put it that way. It's a challenge. And one time, we were taking a boat over, myself and another petty officer. We were taking an old wooden buoy boat, and we were going to go take it over to Fairhaven. And this was an old boat, and we got halfway across, and the engine died, and we couldn't get it going. So and then we couldn't get the Woods Hole base station either. So we called a Mayday, and my God, that Mayday was heard from Maine to New Jersey, and it brought a lot of attention. Not that we possibly could have sunk, but so that was pretty harrowing for sure. One time I was going through the Woods Hole Passage, and I had a 30-foot utility boat, and there was a wall of water standing at the end of Woods Hole, which was a rip, and the rip was, it had to have been 5 feet, 6 feet high wall of water. Well, I wasn't going to go through it because it was not for me. So we went back to the base in Little Harbor, and I told the chief, I said, well, I'll take the 36-footer and go through it, but I'm not taking the 30-foot through it because I'm afraid it would tip over. So the long and the short of it is, once I got the 36-footer and we went out there, the rip had disappeared and it was all flat water, so it was okay with me too. Interesting. On the water, you've got to be aware because things can change in a minute. Going in the fog, when you're in the fog and you don't have radar, you can get yourself in some serious trouble very quickly. And I've seen it happen, and it's people trying to help other people. Said, oh my God, you're bringing my mind back to a life here. Try me another one. I'm thinking on something. Do you have any questions? Yeah? Okay.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Particular. Well, it was like I don't know, 50, 60 guys on one ship, so there was a lot of fooling around and having fun with one another and short sheeting people in their bunks and doing, silly stuff, which is silly now. It was all in good humor, all in good fun. Nobody ever got hurt from anything that we had done, but it's it is life, and good times. They were mostly all good times. I enjoyed being in the service for 5 years, and I had my right mind on, I would have stayed in the service for 20 years. Coast Guard was one of the best, I think, services. We were there to help people and keep people out of danger and save lives. It's just.
What did you think of officers or fellow soldiers?
Well, everybody has their own personality, and officers have theirs, and they're there to make sure that things go right, and you could have what you thought was a good officer, and you could have what you thought was not such a good officer, because they could be hard-nosed, and then you had other officers that would treat you fairly, and they had your respect, and you would do what you were supposed to do, what they told you to do, and that's basically what the military is. You're until you become in charge and you start giving the orders. The biggest part of it was that you paid attention to what you were doing, because if you didn't, you could get yourself hurt very quickly, very, very quickly. It's just.
Do you recall the day your service ended? Where were you?
I was in Highland Light, 1965, January 22nd, 1965. I got out of the service, and then on Cape Cod in 1965, there wasn't much work going on, and I did get a job at Nickerson Lumber Company in Orleans for $1.90 an hour. I think I was making it. Not much money, but.
What did you do in the days and weeks after?
The days and weeks after I got out of the service, adjusting to civilian life again was it was a little difficult, because when you're in the service, you're like a family. Everybody is in the same boat as you are, and they take care of you. You're in the service, they feed you and they house you, and you can get used to that. And but it is like one big family. Everybody watches out for everybody else, and it's a very good feeling to know that somebody is behind you when you're on the street, as they say, and you're in civilian life. You've got to watch your own back, because it can be very difficult out there, especially at this time of the year, because there's not much money around, and at that time I was married and had a child, and so it was my responsibility to basically, all I did was work.
What has changed, or what was different when you got home from the war?
Well, the war, I wasn't in a war. Like I said, I was in the Vietnam era, and I know, what was it like? It was scary. It was scary getting out of the service and not knowing, and having not a great education, as in just high school education when I went into the service. So it was. The work wasn't here. Basically, working in the lumber yard was it, and then I used to go back at night, and they had a shop that made prefab houses, and I worked that. So it was like starting all over again. And then I went to I got a job with the Sheriff's Department in Barnstable, which was another nice feeling job, because there again you were treated like family. All your workers were stuck together and helped each other, and it was a secure job. It had benefits, it had insurance, it had a paycheck every 2 weeks, and I worked at that job. I worked on the inside of the institution for 9 years, and then the county farm also had a farm with cows and chickens uh, and
Keep going.
so I qualified to go outside. I always enjoyed farming, and I stayed there and ran the county farm for another 20 years. So it was a great experience teaching inmates to run the farm, to take care of animals, to do planning, to doing hay, to doing everything that a farm was to do. And it was very rewarding to do that, and I've always enjoyed it. And that is, then I graduated. I retired from the Sheriff's Department in 1996, and then I still stayed in the landscaping business and all that. Well, my life seemed to go in that direction, which I enjoyed also.
How would you have wanted to change the conduct of the war if you could?
The conduct of the war, oh my goodness, there should be a law against wars. It's just, there's nothing ever really that, in my estimation, comes good out of wars. It only brings terrible, terrible, terrible disaster to people, families. There's got to be a better way, but they've been going on for thousands of years, so it doesn't make it right. But I'm against wars myself.
What do you miss about serving?
What do I miss about the service? What do I miss about the service? The camaraderie.
What would you want people to know about this time in history?
This time in history, my God. If you can figure it out, I don't know. I've tried to figure this last 10 years out in my mind with the government and whatever. I find it very difficult to try to understand where we're headed and what we're going to do. That's all I can say. It's perplexing for sure.
What would you tell someone considering joining the Coast Guard?
Go for it. Absolutely go for it. But the Coast Guard has changed a lot too. We never carried guns. We never had guns. Now I see that everybody has sidearms, and there's reasons for that. The Coast Guard has taken on new roles with security and but we didn't have it at that time. We weren't in that desperate of straits where you have all the drug smugglers and everything else that goes on in today's times, and so you have to be prepared for every condition.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I appreciate you having me here and talking about these. It's jogging my memory, which it fades at times, and it brings me back 50 years ago, and it's been a pleasure and a joy to revamp my mind and think of all the good things that did happen, and the people we helped. I would not hesitate to have anybody that thought that they would go into the Coast Guard that they would ever be sorry. That's how I feel about the Guard.
Would you do it all again? Why or why not?
Would I do it all again? And yes, I would do it all again. In a minute, I would do it all again. I can't think of one time that I didn't want to be there. And I hear so many other people in other services say that they couldn't wait to get out. They just do their time. And I thought it was, for me, it was easy. adapt. You could roll with the punches. There's ups and downs in life. At any time, it's never going to be a level playing field. It would be that would be crazy to say, but I can't think of one time that I thought that I didn't want to be there, or thinking about going AWOL or any other things. It just I enjoyed it. It was fulfilling.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your service.
Well, you're entirely welcome. And
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right.